Yeah, films. We watch some films. So let's talk about those.
Let's get into it today. So we are talking about Candyman from 2021. Oof, it's like 7 times already. Oh my gosh. A sequel to the horror film of 1992 that returns to the now gentrified Chicago neighborhood where the legend began, which is Cabrini Green, and it is written and directed by DaCosta and produced by Jordan Peele of Monkey Paw Productions. I remember when it was first coming out, everyone was like, Jordan Peele's film. And it's like, nope, this is Nia DaCosta's film.
Yeah.
He's just also there. He's helping for sure. But, you got to give her credit. So, Candyman is a sequel to the 90s folklore villain, and the film is creative with its storytelling, handling pain and grief with care. It's also captivating to watch. It has some of the similar cinematic moments that you would find in something like Get Out and Us, that like topsy-turvy kind of turning us over events with the camera. We encounter the Candyman in mirrored images where DaCosta plays with these two realities really nicely, where we reveal his menacing presence in gruesome acts and then mirror them, pun intended, with an absent foe in the real world. So really played around with this, like, you don't get the whole, you don't see the whole vision, you don't know the whole truth unless you're looking in the right place, which is the whole point of the film, was that we did not know the whole truth when we first visited Cabrini Green in the original film, and it's because we had to look in the right place. So in the beginning, we revisit Cabrini Green, first catching a glimpse of the place during the time period of the first movie, and the Chicago projects are bustling with activity. After a young boy's experience with a sinister candy man, it's with a space, because it's a man who has candy, we are propelled into the present. And we find artist Anthony McCoy and his partner Brianna are having a dinner party with her brother and his partner. And here we are introduced to the Candyman lore, reminded of the plot of the first film following Helen Lyle. It's literally like a word for word of what happened last time. So it's like previously on. Because Lyle had worked to uncover the folklore behind Candyman and its effect on the vulnerable population. However, her interpretation came from that of an outsider. And when her tale was reshaped by the minds and mouths of the residents of Cabrini Green, she was no longer the strong heroine succumbed to the charms of Tony Todd, and who could blame her, but is now the nosy white savior turned baby-stealing villain who preyed upon the housing unit. It's quite a fun retelling of what happened last time from a look of the people who were there, to being like, this lady just came up and did all these horrible things, versus what we had seen in the last one. And the spin on the story leads to a conversation about the real horrors the people of Cabrini Green were facing, and that is gentrification. And their story of Candyman and Helen Lyle's monstrous headlines mark the community too troubled to exist, and so it has ceased since then. Artists and well-to-dos in Chicago were sweeping in to buy the land and property for cheap while pricing out the community who called the place home for generations. So it eventually succumbed to the very horrors that it was trying to fight against in the previous one. And inspired by the depressing tale of gentrification and ignoring his own part in it, because he is one of these artists who's moved in, it's a weird, like, someone mentions it, and there is this weird time where, I think because of editing, where his partner Brianna is sometimes like conscious of and sympathetic towards some of the challenges, but then sometimes she's just like, she's benefiting off of the system as well, so it's like hard. And so he's kind of, he's doing what he can do. So he begins a new art installation based on the tale titled Say My Name, and he beckons viewers to participate and call upon the entity. And as explained in the first and this one must only speak his name 5 times in a mirror to call him forward. And so for his installation, a mirror sits on a wall, and when opened, it reveals a complicated and graphic portrayal of black pain. And his art is scoffed at, and he eventually gets into an altercation with someone and leaves. However, his piece has already set in motion the ancient forgotten tradition of summoning him, and I can't say his name anymore. I think I've hit the limit, so I'm just gonna call him the Sweets Man, or I'm gonna like whisper it so you don't know.
Yeah.
So
I like
then
the Sweets Man. I think
the
that's a fun.
Sweets Man.
I like it,
It's
yeah.
different. Now the sleeping beast is reawakened by a horny art assistant, and the rest is history.
Yeah.
She says his name, and then oops, now he's here. And what a crazy scene! It was so cool. Like that's like one of the scenes that really stood out to me of using the mirror and then using real life, because it's
Yeah.
like in the mirror you see him come up and slit her throat, but then you're seeing them and there's nobody there. It
Yeah.
was so cool. Like that stuff was like awesome. Like you couldn't be handed a better story.
Yeah.
So after a visit to the now desolate Cabrini Green, McCoy meets William Burke, a previous resident of Cabrini and the boy who saw the guy with candy in the beginning.
Yeah.
It is here we learn something important about the Sweets Man. Burke reveals more of the story that we had seen in the beginning, and like Helen Lyle's experience, we had only a limited view to work with, which influenced our interpretations of the events. So we had seen in the beginning a young boy afraid of this man with candy screaming before cutting away. So he had like gone down to do some laundry. There was this creepy hole in the wall, and this Sweets Man came out of the wall and he screamed. So we thought, oh, this clearly something horrible happened to this young boy because of the Sweets Man. But no, turns out that Burke explains that after the initial scream, it was generally one of surprise, just like, oh, there's a guy on the wall.
Yeah.
There you are. And not expectant demise. Like he wasn't actually afraid for his life. He's given candy by the nice man before returning up to the stairs. But he had explained that his Sweets Man was this man, who's named Sherman.
Yeah.
Because this man would often give children candy in the neighborhoods. And recently, Sherman has been hiding and on the run after a razor blade was found in a white child's candy wrapper. Which, as like a side note, the real folklore of like the razor blades in the candy, or just like candy being bad, is based off of a real situation in which a white man laced these big pixie sticks, like the ones that were in like the rubbery tubes, plastic tubes, with like arsenic or rat poison or something, and he gave it to his son and his son's friend, and then like was like, oh, someone did it. But it was him. So clearly, just like how everyone was running around trying to figure out who it was, they're not going to blame this white father. So Sherman is the expected culprit. And so when Burke had that initial scream of surprise, it had alerted the police to Sherman's location, resulting in them murdering him. They thought they were saving the day. Or did they? You know, they just thought they were doing their job. And they, expected him to be the villain. And then it's obviously discovered that he was not. Because then another kid had razors and he wasn't around. So with this, it's like at first we had been led to believe that Sherman was a villain and that he had scared young Burke and intended harm to him. Now we're shown the truth, and we see that not only his innocence, but also the cruelty he suffered due to the same limited point of view. And instead, the fear that Burke as a child is experiencing isn't from Sherman showing up through the wall. It's from the police brutality.
Yeah.
Like, it's the real fear. Burke then goes on to explain that the Sweets Man is not a singular man at all, instead saying Candyman is not a he. Candyman is the whole damn hive. Because he is not one villainous man, but rather a history of men. He is an idea, a trauma, an inherited pain, and word of caution. The Sweets Man is each black man who was wrongfully accused of a crime and murdered for it. And the Sweets Man is generational trauma made manifest. And in this revelation, this more distinct ownership of him as a folkloric protector elevates him from the limited interpretation of the first film. It is for this point that I really appreciated the film, because it was like it was specifically addressing an issue that I had with the first one, and we again talked about that in our first episode. So director and writer DaCosta explains the depth of Sugarman's influence and her intention in making this film, saying, Candyman is so perennial. We're talking about the cycles of violence and how history repeats itself and how we collectively process trauma through stories. It's always time to tell a story like Candyman, which is the big tragedy about the tale in the first place. Yeah. And it, I think it's something to... There's a meta aspect to that too, in the fact that this is a film, right? That we're using the film to live through and air through some of these horrors.
Yeah.
And that's exactly what like folklore is. Like folklore has adapted from, the word of mouth, these tales of caution that you would, tell kids so that they don't go into the woods and to danger. Instead, it is now transformed into these films that are used to be those words of caution, to be the story that tells you not to go into the woods because it's dangerous. And so this film is the revitalization of the folklore of Candyman. So yeah, I just really love that part about it. And it is a way to, like she said, collectively process trauma through telling the story and giving it a name. And so the rest of the film follows McCoy as he spirals, followed by the entity and seemingly becoming him. And as an artist, he had attempted to create something from the pain to essentially do what this film is doing, right? But through his art. And it was called cliche by a critic. And even like when he first pitches the idea, they're like, that's old news. Or like when he tries to pitch his original idea, they're like, that's old news. And then he has to transform it into this like something that's more poppy, something that will grab people's attentions. Like even what he feels is the right way to convey what he's feeling isn't enough for the audience that he's reaching out to. And so later he created that piece that gets mocked anyway. So later when the Sweets Man is killing off idiots who dare speak his name, this critic pivots and invites McCoy in for an exclusive interview. It was so rude. She was like all of a sudden like, oh, it's interesting now. She's like interested in this work because now it's tied directly to violence on white bodies specifically. Yeah. Like before, when you were telling the history and present day pain that Black people are experiencing, oh, that's old news. We don't, like, everyone talks about it. We don't need to keep talking about it, which is like obviously like echoing what people are saying about the film in itself. Like any critic who's just like, oh, elevated horror. Yeah. Like she's literally like, them.
And the whole thing is like, maybe don't erase the history that was traumatic, that like white people did. Like, stop trying to erase it. Say it for what it was. Yeah. And she's like, that's old news. That seems like a lot, and I just don't want to. And then when she can benefit from it, she's like, heck yeah.
Yeah, it's like, okay, we get it, we know, okay, and so we can put it behind us, and we could do something new, something spunky, and then it's like, oh no, white people died. Now we need to talk about it. Now it's sensational. Now it's something. Yeah. Now I care. And she asked him about his work around gentrification, like his motives, and then his experiences in the hood, to which he responds vehemently, who do you think makes the hood? The city cuts off a community and waits for it to die. Then they invite developers in and say, hey, you artists, you young people, you white, preferably or only, please come to the hood. It's cheap. And if you stick it out for a couple of years, we'll bring you a Whole Foods. It's literally what's happening. And it's what's happening in our own neighborhoods quite often here in Philadelphia. So, gentrification was a strong critique in the first one, and that follows through in the sequel. Only the story is elevated from a distant view and instead drops us into the community directly. So it was like this white woman coming in and being like, what's everyone's problem? This is so cute that this is how you guys are dealing with this. Like, isn't it adorable how they still believe in like this folklore monster? Like, yeah. Helen, what are you, like, it was so insane. They definitely dabbled on gentrification for sure. But this film was like, okay, we're just going to call it like it is because we have to call it like it is. But that's not really what we want to talk about.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, that sucks, but that is only but like it is a symptom of the root cause, essentially.
Yeah.
Like, it's just another thing that we're experiencing, but there is something else here that is at work that is insidious. So because for them, gentrification is a direct evil and tied to the systemic pain enacted on Black and poor communities. But the larger picture evolves away from this one aspect of the trauma in the Cabrini Green legacy. It just takes it from there. So as a teaser for the film, one of the trailers released featured shadow puppets that were these recreations of the stories that Burke will share later in the film, and some others that aren't overtly spoken about, but you see them in the credits.
Yeah.
And they are based on real life instances of Black men being harmed and punished for crimes they did not commit. And you're welcome to look it up. They are real, they have existed, and I don't feel like talking about them because you could just watch the puppet show and know that those things are real, except for Tony Todd's character from last time. All the other ones are very real, and it's gross. It hurts. So go watch it. But this exploration of the character was creative, and it finally addressed some of the complaints that I had about the first one, like I explained. So actor Yahya Abdul-Mateen, who plays Anthony McCoy and also is in Watchmen, so it's like, agreed that this shift from Helen's perspective to that of the community members affected was really important and vital to the story. And in an interview with Digital Spy, he said, "I'm really happy that this film is talking about the subject of unwilling martyrs and the trauma placed on the bodies of the Black community and the trauma within the Black experiences at the hand of white violence and what we can do with that." So very appreciative that we're no longer following this white woman. It's like, oh, it's so quaint. So for Lyle, Tony Todd's villain was singular. He was a monster that she had to reckon with or succumb to. And for people like McCoy and Burke, the character was instead a catharsis. So Burke explains that Candyman is a way to deal with the fact that these things happen to us, are still happening. And further, after sharing the story of specifically Tony Todd's Candyman and all the other ones, saying a story like that, a pain like that, lasts forever, right? It has a toll. It has an impact on the community. It has an impact on the earth, on the very place that it took place, right?
Yeah.
So the tale transforms here into a way for this community to put a word to their pain. It is no longer about a villain terrorizing an already vulnerable community, but instead something to point to separate themselves from and move forward. How else could you put generations of pain and injustice into words? Instead of, like, you make it into this boogeyman so that you can tell people, like, you can tell the younger generations what to fear and how to be alert, right? While also, what was that?
I said for safety,
yeah, for safety, exactly. And so that you can also kind of separate yourself too. Like, it becomes the story, we've spoken it into existence, and now we can go to the next thing, right? But we can still use it as a tool to do it. So we have seen the true monster change shape throughout history in our world, right? From militias hunting runaway enslaved people to the modern day police force that are continuing that harm. And the pain and the stain on environments like Cabrini Green is deep. It's been festering, and it's insidious, and it's tormented by this cyclical violence on Black bodies. So the history of the Candymen acts as an echo, like a haunting in our country that isn't going anywhere if we don't learn to speak its name and to speak truth to power. Which is why it's so cool. Like, I know people hate on it because they're like, and I will say, the end felt like there was some editing things going on. Like, all of a sudden we were doing this other thing, and I felt like the beginning was such a slow burn into this, like, descent, and then all of a sudden, like, McCoy was just, like, in it. And then I was like, but what's happened with Brianna? She got a lot of trauma she's dealing with. And I was really appreciative of her character setting boundaries and sticking to them and being like, no, it is not my job to fix you. Which they do not often get that ability to do, especially in film, but in real life, like the ability to be like, that is not my job. I don't have to. And for my safety, for my sanity, I'm going to step away from that.
Yeah.
Really and it's not like a place of hate, right? It's not like, oh, you're awful, like I hate you now. It was, I care for you a lot, but I still can't do that.
Yeah.
Like give them some grace for that. So but I just feel like towards the end it did feel a little like stressed. Like, what are we doing? I wish we could have spent a little more time, and maybe even for the dummies like me, some, narration. Like that was a little more like on the nail on the head. I mean, it pretty much is, like, it is very unsubtle. But I don't know. I was just like, what's happening?
Helps,
Yeah.
In general. It's just helpful. The more information you have, the better.
Yes. Tananarive contextualizes this taking back of the folklore in a discussion that served as an accompaniment of the film titled Candyman, the Impact of Black Horror, saying really what was fueling a lot of the fear around him, being the Sweets Man, was the fear of Black masculinity, Black men, fear of the urban jungle. I mean, Cabrini Green itself is a monster. Really some of the worst stereotypes around Blackness. So it was very important for Nia DaCosta and Monkey Paw to come and reframe a story about Black trauma through a Black lens, not through a white one. And it absolutely transforms the story. It gives the power to different people. And again, it becomes less of like this tourist, like this like dark tourist moment, right? Where, oh, we can just dabble in danger and then go to our safety. Like, we don't know. So in the end of the film, McCoy successfully revives the folkloric monster, but this time transforming him into a weapon for justice. And Burke creates this or organizes this attack on McCoy, influencing his murder by police, which turns him into a new Sweets Man, because now he has suffered violence from the same people who have been doing the violence this whole time. So then later, Brianna speaks his name, invoking him as that weapon for protection against the true villains, the police, and she is told to continue this story to tell everyone and spread the tale of Candyman so that he can live on. Only now he is no longer a symbol of fear, but instead a symbol of vengeance.
I know. One, that was a lot because you're tired, but also because, like, a lot just mental. It's heavy stuff to process, and it is a lot to unpack. And you did so lovely. You did intentional and wonderful. So kudos.